All right, welcome back to the War Room. I'm here with Bert, per usual, and the legendary Dylan Delgatto from Texans County. Boys, how we doing?
Good. How are you, bro?
We're doing good. And feeling an extra pep in my step this week after watching that amazing Texans blowout playoff win. And I don't know about you guys. I was expecting it to be close and, for a bit to be a good game. I was not expecting it to be a blowout in the direction that it was for the Texans. Almost put up a 50 burger on those guys. Like, it was just pretty insane to watch.
Yeah.
You do need to take into account that there was 14 points scored defensively. I don't know.
Yeah, I took it into account. It was amazing.
I don't know. I
very much took it into account. I was yelling and screaming alongside you.
But I
very much took it into account.
Look, all I'm gonna say is this: when that first interception was thrown, Cleveland was driving. It could be a very different game if
they were still down 2 scores at that time. Like,
for sure.
And I know I'm getting into the could have, would have, should have, but
no, I mean
this is being spoken like a very, very depressed Cowboys fan from the following day.
That's a whole nother story.
We don't have time for that. Okay, anywho, but yeah, some of the notes I had was, look, Stroud just had a phenomenal game, 16-21, 274 passing yards, 13 yards per attempt on average, 3 touchdowns, and a passer rating of 157.2, which is very, very near perfect. And I believe he's already tied the franchise record for playoff touchdowns or exceeded it. I can't remember if it's tied or exceeded.
He's close.
And offensive line also had 0 sacks allowed, with, in my opinion, who should be the NFL Defensive Player of the Year in Myles Garrett, and also just a really, really good front seven in general. So I think that was just an incredible performance by them. Yeah, I mean, whatever stats you look at, they're for the most part good. Dylan, what was your thoughts in regards to just the game itself? I mean, from the first half was good, but the second half just turned into a curb stomping. What was kind of some of your key takeaways?
Yeah, I think the fact that Nico Collins did what Nico Collins did, all week, and even the Colts game, I was kind of like, we're kind of screwed because we had so many injuries at that position, and you would think that Nico would have gained all the coverage, but somehow he still had 100 yards and kind of balled out. So I think like that stood out as like no one seems to be able to guard the guy. Mm-hmm. And but I think that what stood out is just the defense and Bobby Slowick, who I am going to be devastated when he gets another job in the offseason if he decides to take an offer. I don't know if he will. I heard a lot of mixed emotions, but I think that the defense, that may have been the biggest game they've ever played. Besides the Colts game, they were pretty lights out then in the Titans games too. But that was a statement game by them to go out and shut down the wonder run of Joe Flacco that has been insane. I memean, Joe Flacco played like he's played every game. It was just he threw 2 pick sixes that kind of screwed your team over. But to watch them make the adjustments from what was 3 weeks ago against that team, when Amari Cooper had a career day against you, to all right, well, we're just gonna put Stingley on him and he ain't gonna do anything, and he didn't. And then to sack Flacco and put the pressure and make him uncomfortable and force those mistakes. And there was that clip that went viral of D'Amico telling Christian Harris, "Hey, I think this is what's gonna happen. You're gonna get that pick." And then it happened. Like that is wild to me. So just the defense, and like I said about Bobby, when Bobby's on, and he is an incredible play caller. And every drive of that first half, Bobby was on the money. And I mean, there was the one play with Brevin Jordan. There was Mechie that drove us down pretty far. Nico, like Devin Singletary, everything Bobby did was incredible, and he kept his team in the game when the defense was struggling in the first half, and it was great. I have so many thoughts, and I'm like, this team just has not reached their potential. Like you got,
and that's a scary thought, right?
You got
it feels like they're not even within, I think 60 to 70% of their full potential, but yet they're continuing to exceed expectations. And speaking of exceeding expectations, I remember you and I had a conversation at the start of this season, particularly about who you mentioned earlier in Nico Collins. And, we were discussing, hey, we know the last two, Nico's first 2 years under that weird West Coast offense and minimal targets, averaging, I think, less than 5 targets a game, maybe even less than that. Basically getting thrown slants and hook and button curls the whole time instead of any kind of verticals or posts or, a lot of key crossing routes that you would give to a high volume, big target like him, with him being 6'4", running a 4.40 and being 220 pounds. Just, we were looking at this in regards to, look, this is a guy that was being underutilized for 2 years, and it's just like having a Ferrari in the basement, right? And, we were wondering, hey, does he actually have the potential to be more than just a really good wide receiver too, right? Can he make that step to be a wide receiver 1? And obviously Tank Dell took a lot of that volume away from him being a true wide receiver 1 early in the season. But since the injury, I mean, obviously there's some stats that paint the picture pretty easily. But from your opinion, for what you've seen so far with multiple 100-yard or more games in reception yards, do you think he's actually taken that step to a wide receiver 1 caliber performer? What were your thoughts from what you've seen since the playoff push?
I mean, Nico, it's all season been the guy. I mean, there was the time where Tank was balling, but the beauty of having 2 guys like them is one's going to get a lot of coverage one game and one is going to get a lot of openness. And you single cover one of them, they're probably going to make a play, especially Nico, because he has that Hopkins sort of vibe to him where he can kind of just make any catch and run with it. But I think it's evident that, ever since the Tank injury, Nico's kind of carried in some capacity. Obviously, CJ's done a lot, but you take away Nico from every game we've won, you're not winning the game. Like, you're just not. You don't have Noah Brown. You didn't have Woods for some of those games. Like, it was straight up Nico. I think he's taking the leap. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't go sign another receiver. I would love Hopkins. I'd love Mike Evans. I'd love whoever, but Nico's.
There's a lot of talk about Evans coming home.
Yeah,
there's a lot of talk
in Tampa, but like Nico's taking the leap, and Tank is going to be a great wide receiver too. And I think it's almost like a 1A, 1B type of thing for them. Is you don't know who's going to have the better game, but you got to think when you have a quarterback like Stroud and you really start to make the passing game your star thing, but also having a good running back, that those guys are going to explode. And just adding another playmaker, whether that's, drafting a solid receiver or, we've seen Mechie the last few weeks. The increase has helped him. Like, he had a big play this weekend, and I think every game for him that he gets more reps, he's going to do better. And if Mechie's the next guy, then great. If Mechie's, the future wide receiver 3 and 4, like, cool. But, I mean, you just keep adding superstars to this offense or guys that have that potential. It's going to be crazy. So, but Nico's made that leap, and I have him in a top 10 receiver role. What he's done this year has been unreal. To go from 500 yards max last year to over 1,000, missing 2 games still, and putting the world on your shoulders in the play. I mean, come on. He's a stud, and him and Stroud are going to be good for years to come.
Absolutely. And, you think about, you talking about him being a D-hop style athlete, right? Being able to contort his body in all kinds of different ways to make catches and 50-50 balls. The nice thing about him is you get that crazy athleticism, but you also get that, I mean, there's no other way to put it. He's very a similar build to Andre Johnson, and that's why Andre went out of his way to train him in the offseason and also through the season in regards to that, because he also has that size and that wingspan to use his body to create separation on some of those 50-50 balls as well. I'd say in regards to his overall size, a little bit more than a DeAndre Hopkins. He's that guy. Like I said, he's been that Ferrari in the shed for the last 2 years, just waiting to be unleashed in the right offense and with the right quarterback. And I totally agree that the steps are there. And then speaking of also progress we've seen, especially I'd say significant progress from the Broncos game after, as this offense has had to rely a little bit more on the run with that loss of Tank Dell, the run game as well. With Devin Singletary kind of going from that 1B role to pretty much the number one role right now. And I know you've been singing his praises, but Bert, what have you seen in regards to the development of the run game, and also the offensive line throughout the season? Because obviously we started off a little bit on the struggle bus,
where
and now it's been a lot more solid.
Well, that's the thing that I was really going to hit on is just the offensive line growth throughout the season. I'll be honest, looking into the beginning of the season, I was really concerned about where the offensive line was going. That was part of the whole Davis Mills situation. It wasn't good. Like, you can't sugarcoat it. It was awful. And, when we drafted CJ, that was kind of one of my main concerns, was that you're investing all this money in a really young player. But aside from Laramie Tunsil, there's not a whole lot of depth there. But I'm very impressed to see how that offensive line has shifted. I think you really have to give a whole lot of credit to Bobby Slowick, especially with the fact that you're mixing the pass game and the run game. Obviously, with CJ back there, you're letting him pass the ball, right? But you're mixing in those run games with Singletary just to be able. I think there's a lot of balance in that whole system. Yeah, I've been very impressed with the offensive line.
And one of the key offensive linemen we've seen, be a completing addition to this offensive line is Juice Scruggs.
Yes.
And Dylan, I know you've sung his praises all season. I mean, what have you seen in regards to his development over this playoff push period as well? Because I know he's been one of the keys, right?
I'll answer the first question as well. The run game really shifted when they shifted the philosophy is we're going to get the pass game going so it opens up the run. That was simple. It was instead of we're going to run so we open the pass. No, we're going to pass so we can open up the run. And then play action started working. The offense changes course. But, Juice has been crucial. I mean, his first game, he stepped in mid-game because Titus got hurt. And then he had a rough game or two here and there, or some rough snaps, but he's been good. I'm genuinely don't know what they're going to do next year. I think the way Juice is slotted in, he's guaranteed himself a role somewhere on the line, whether that's guard or center. You got Tunsil. That's a given. So your left guard situation, you have three options. You have Kenyon Green, Juice Scruggs, or all the other guys that are hurt right now.
Yeah.
And then
just the plethora.
We could even say that Titus Howard could end up becoming the left guard. I doubt that. I think they'll put him back at right tackle, but whatever. And then you got the center, which you could go Juice or Patterson, or you
can go Green as well.
Mason Dieter's been good, and you got Kendrick Green. And then you got Shaq Mason locked there for 4 more years, and then you either re-sign Fant or you keep Titus. That's a little off track. I don't know what they're going to do with that next year, but. You mentioned O-line felt like a weird thing going into the offseason. But I think a lot of people forgot that the Shaq Mason trade happened and you already had your franchise tackles. And you really only worried about 2 other positions. Then Nick was aggressive and got Patterson, who in his short tenure as a center before he was out for the season, he was electric. He was one of the best centers we've ever had, in that few stretch. I mean, he did not allow sacks. I mean, he was lethal. And then we saw Dieter step in, and Dieter's been good. So just the credit goes to the O-line coach and Nick. They got guys that can slot in, and that was something that I always said, man, the Patriots always make people look good.
Mhm.
They always
Yeah.
have this O-line. They go else when they're garbage, and I think that Nick knew kind of what he looks for in O-line and what he looks for in an O-line coach, and they got the right guy. And O-line doesn't concern me anymore. I don't know. I don't care who's out there. I mean, Charlie Heck looked good for 3 games. That guy was garbage in the past. So respectfully, I hope he doesn't see this ever, but like at the end of the day, like we have made it where we can make any O-line good. And that's been the success to a lot of this season.
So I'm gonna present an idea here.
Yeah.
Oh Lord.
Is it because I think you have to give some of the credit to CJ in that whole situation.
Sure.
Because the offensive line, it's one thing when the offensive line is porous, and it's very easy to tell. It's another thing when you have a quarterback that just looks so composed in the pocket. It almost gives the offensive line a sense of even elevation, right? I think there's some of that. I still think there's improvements that need to be made up front.
For sure.
That's it. Frankly, I think that's one of the biggest things that needs to be addressed in the offseason is both offensive and defensive line. But I think you cannot talk about the offensive line and then not talk about just how composed CJ has been.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think CJ has done an incredible job, and there has been time where he just gets rocked, right? I mean that's been the story, but
Like against the Jets.
Well, I mean, he was out. He was out for what?
Right.
2 games with a concussion.
Right. And well, part of that's the MetLife concrete that
okay.
But
it was a weird hit. Yeah,
but
I'll give you that.
I will say, like, I don't know, and I might disagree with you about how much we need to invest because we have the investment. It's the healthiness that screwed us over.
Yeah.
Like 4 different left tackles, 4 different right tackles, multiple different guards. Like this season has just been injury ridiculed. I mean, you get the Greens back. I think there will be more consistency for him. I think there will be a better structure on that line.
No, I agree.
But
I agree 100%. The one thing I kind of think might need to be addressed is just depth. And I mean, that's it. I will say the Texans, if you look at the team, I mean, we touched base on this a little bit earlier. I mean, look at the receiver room, right? It's stacked. I mean, you're talking about.
I think it's the deepest our receiver room has been in franchise history, quite frankly.
5 or 6 guys deep. The tight end room, right? Same thing. Defensive backs, same thing. Right? Okay, fair.
That would be my
with Jimmy being hurt. It's not as thick as it should be. Yeah,
fair. But there's a lot of talent up front in that room.
Sure.
Saying. Running back, same thing. I think there's some work that can be addressed in the offensive line.
Yeah,
it's especially in terms of depth.
I agree. I think you can. There needs more consistency in the depth for sure, but
100%.
I think starters. I feel pretty good about it. I think, and they'll figure it out. There'll be cuts. There'll be trades and re-signs and everything. But I think I would say that secondary and depth at wide receivers is probably where I land as the biggest needs. I know this is not an off-season talk, but when
I was about to say, fellas, we're still in the playoffs.
Yeah, but I it got to that. But I think depth is huge. But let's talk about the Ravens.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the Ravens, you made a really good point earlier in regards to the shift of this offense, right? And I'd say the largest pivot was how the offense shifted after the Broncos game. For me, that was kind of a turning point because then we couldn't rely on Tank. We couldn't rely on high volume in him and in just one direction. Not necessarily he was getting all the targets, but you lose a key weapon. You do have to fall a little bit more back on your strategy and your play calling. And when we last played the Ravens, it was exactly how you were talking about when we were trying to still be that run first to set up the pass and play action team, right? And we even talked about the amount of times they were running play action to where it just wasn't even viable, right? It was like, okay, look, if you run play action at the goal line for the 10th time in a row, you're just wasting 3 seconds before getting the ball off because of the fact that they know it's coming, right? You're not being sold. You're averaging 2 yards a carry. They're not even going to really bite on the run because they know they can stop it. And now we've seen that transition you were talking about in regards to using the pass to set up the run, right? And getting a little bit more yards per carry, opening up some more holes off of some wide zone schemes and some other stuff. So now that we have this offense kind of turning in more of that direction, how do you think this matches up against the Ravens defense?
This is going to sound bad, and I hope it doesn't haunt me and kick me in the butt. I'm not as afraid of the Ravens defense as everyone is.
That's fair.
Marlon Humphrey's out. Kyle Hamilton's a stud, and I'm terrified of that guy, and I wish he was a Texan, but
no, he was close to being one too.
He was. We were very interested, and we chose Kenyon Green. Whatever. But I think it's going to be good. I think the big thing is they're not the greatest in the passing game. I think that's where a lot of their, if I remember stats correctly, that's where a lot of their struggles happen. And if you can use Nico and you can use Dalton and you can use Brevin Jordan and Steven Sims, honestly, Steven Sims is my sleeper of the week for the Texans this week. I just have an odd feeling that his speed and his playmaking ability is gonna come crucial on a play for him this week. There's just something about that that's just makes me feel like that elevation is gonna pay off. But I think that the Ravens defense can easily be fooled because I personally don't think they've played as good of a quarterback as CJ at all this year. Right, recently, I saw a stat they had the 23rd easiest schedule in the league. We had the one of the easiest, but the only teams that they've lost to are the Browns, the Colts, twice the Steelers. We've beat all those teams. I just feel good. I feel like they're a beatable team, especially with playoff Lamar and the rust they have. But I feel like if you can continue to run the ball like you've been running the ball and continue to just move the offense with some big plays, but also remembering like, hey, these screens are working and these quick little checkdowns to Dalton Schultz or Brevin or CJ or to Nico, like it's all working. I mean, Nico scored on us on a little screen and it worked. So if you keep it simple and come out hot like you did, I think that's very possible. I think whatever team scores first is going to be gaining a lot of momentum in this game.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever defense makes a mistake first is going to be the team that probably loses because you're talking about two really high-powered offenses, but you're talking about Lamar Jackson that has won one playoff game and has the same amount of touchdowns as CJ Stroud, but he's played 5 playoff games. So
I think you have to talk. We need to talk a little bit more about Lamar Jackson and the Ravens offense because I think that's where the game is going to be won or lost. Yeah. What I have seen with the Ravens throughout the season is a focus on getting Lamar Jackson comfortable with his weapons, getting him comfortable with Odell Beckham Jr., getting him comfortable with Zay Flowers. That's what I've seen the focus on with this Ravens offense. I think if there's a weaker spot in the defense for the Texans, I think it's going to be our secondary, right? Especially dealing with multiple wide receivers that have talent. I know we were able to get by with Cleveland this past weekend with only really having to worry about Amari Cooper, right? Yeah. Now the question becomes okay, you need to be able to control multiple receivers. You also need to be able to keep an eye on Lamar Jackson because guess what? Let's say, you're able to take care of those receivers. Lamar's really good with running the ball as well.
Yeah.
You have to have a lot of defensive or linemen and linebackers flying to the football. And I've seen the linebackers make a lot of improvements throughout the season, especially between the tackles.
Oh yeah.
But again, this is Lamar Jackson. He has made his money off of
running.
Exactly.
Running in read options with a little bit of RPOs.
What I would say to counter, Lamar's a baller. And I'd hate for him to have his first real good playoff game against us, and that would hurt a little bit.
That would fit right into Houston history.
So hold up.
I
heard this stat the other day, and you guys might find it interesting. So Lamar Jackson has played in 4 playoffs games, correct? Do you know how many first quarter points that he has scored in that offense? A big fat goose egg.
You know how many
points?
You know how many touchdowns CJ has? 3.
They were asking Lamar.
I think when it comes to the playoff Lamar, right? You have to keep in mind. I'd say he has been one of the many quarterbacks in the NFL. Not many. One of the stars in the NFL that has been depleted of really good wide receivers of those last 3 years. I'd say this year, this might be the best wide receiver core he's had. I mean, because now he has a triple threat of Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers kind of being the guy at the helm, and then you have Odell Beckham. You've got some other guys, but that's kind of your big 3 right there. I've seen throughout the season with these 3 is not one of them has taken all the volume. If anything, I'd say your biggest home run hitter is Zay Flowers, the rookie. Odell has been sporadic, getting 60 and 70-yard games every now and then, having some red zone threat ability to score and get it to the end zone. Bateman has been even more sporadic than him. But you got to think in the last couple of years with Lamar, in regards to his receivers, for 2 of those years going back, the last 4 playoff games he's had, 2 of those his only real weapon in regards to wide receivers was Hollywood Brown, and then his next best wide receiver threat is a 3 tight end look out of a pro set using 3 tight ends and sending them all down the field and then hoping you can sneak in Hollywood Brown through there. This year, and that's kind of been what it's been the last couple of years, right? And last year was a little bit something different. They really kind of were struggling for weapons in general. This year, you've still got the good tight end system. You've got the good running game. You're still a run-first team, but now you have a trio of receivers that all have playmaking potential, but none of them are high-volume consistency, except for maybe Zay Flowers. So it's a little bit – I think we're going to see a different look in the playoffs. I don't know if it's going to be for the better or for the worse. Yeah. But I would see a better attempt at utilizing their passing game with more volume than in the last 3 years. And I think that's something different that Lamar is going to be trying to do.
So I am going to point out one other thing. I know you talked about the trio wide receiver core. Don't forget that you have a very capable tight end returning this game for Baltimore.
Yeah,
Mark Andrews.
He's going to be rusty.
It's still Mark Andrews.
Oh, I know.
You have to take that into account.
But I would say, going back to what you mentioned, Lamar, he can run. The Texans play a lot of zone defense still. Stingley does a lot of man-to-man. Nelson does a little bit, but we play a lot of zone coverage still. And I think that will help contain Lamar because you're going to have Christian Harris and Cashman kind of in that area where they see him cross that line of scrimmage, they're on him. And we know how Christian Harris treats running backs. I mean, we watched him brutally assault Derrick Henry for 2 games.
Yep.
So and they've made a lot of D-line moves with Barnett, with Tyre Tart, with Majai Sanders. Like, we have good depth at the D-line where I feel really, really good about the run game, especially with Will Anderson. That I really do think if you just keep Lamar where he has to throw the ball, that you're going to see mistakes. And he's a great QB. But I think if you force him to throw the ball, at some point there's going to be a mistake made. And we saw that with Flacco. They couldn't run the ball. Yep. And obviously saying Lamar and Flacco, I mean, that's very different gaps. But we saw that with Flacco. We applied pressure. We forced him into mistakes. Well, if Lamar can't scramble, they're not going to get anywhere with that. So he's going to feel forced to throw the ball more. And he's going to see a locked up Zay Flowers, and he's either going to one test the locked up Zay Flowers, and Stingley's going to either let him get nowhere, or he's going to pick it off, and two, he's going to see Steven Nelson, who had a great game last week, and he's going to see Petrie, who is hungry for that interception, and he's going to see Blake Cashman and Christian Harris, who have been all over the ball. So I think if you can contain Lamar, like you said, if you can stop the Lamar run, you stop that offense. And Dalvin Cook is their lead back this week. And I wanted him, but like the guy didn't do well in New York. And I know that scheme can make really any running back look good, but it's his first game in multiple weeks where he's going to have a lot of carries. I think you might see a kind of not in full function Dalvin Cook, right? Like you might see a really fresh Dalvin Cook too. I can't say that, but you might see a Dalvin Cook that is exhausted or that gets exhausted quick because he's not used to 20 carries a game. So I'm intrigued to see what the Ravens have to on offense and what D'Amico's done. Just knowing how drastic the film has been from week 1 to now, like that was not the same. This is not the same Ravens they faced, and we are not the same Texans that they faced.
Yep.
So it's going to be real interesting to see kind of what they do. And if you go back to week 1, look at the score at halftime, 7-6. You can't tell me that we contained Lamar. Like it's the story of what happened last year is when your offense can't stay on the field, your defense is taxed the whole game.
Yep.
And that's what happened in week 1. And the second half, they brutalized us because our offense was garbage and they were taxed. So I think
when you're averaging like 2 minutes per possession, your defense is just going to be running gassers the whole game.
Yeah. So when your defense is taxed, they're going to struggle. And I think the new beauty of that is we have a lot of depth. So you don't have to use Will Anderson every play. You don't have to have Grenard out there every play. You can throw out Derek Barnett alongside one of them, and they'll still – so you have good rotational pieces. You got Khalil Davis who's bursted out. You got Tyre Tart. You got Rankins. You got Collins. Like your D-line is good where you can give those guys, hey, take a play off. And I think if your defense just does what they did week 1 in the first half, you're going to be fine. Like –
And you mentioned that the ability for us to contain Lamar, and obviously, I think everybody in America who ends up playing a quarterback anywhere similar to Lamar, that's the number one thing is containing him, right? The dual threat, especially with his ability to escape the pocket and extend plays, or escape the pocket to set his feet and throw the long ball too, right? You can't forget how good of a thrower he is. The key is going to be the discipline of the edge rushers in particular, right? A lot of teams, when they get to a Lamar type quarterback, their kind of protocol is doing exactly what you're talking about, but out of an odd front, like a 3-4, and playing with safeties back, keeping everything in front of them, not giving any kind of obvious deep balls, and then playing some kind of a zone scheme to kind of cut off the short stuff. Which means a lot of times you're just rushing 3 on any kind of passing down situation. You may even leave a spy in there as a middle linebacker or something like that, and only drop 1 in coverage. But even with the spy, this is why I could write a book on why I hate the 3-4. I've played almost every front in particular since I was a kid, and it's one of my most hated for the sole reason of when the spread offense was not invented, but being utilized at its peak in high school football and the early 2010s, late 2000s, 2009 stuff like that. And you had more of these dual threat passers coming into play. Basically, everyone in high school football's answer was the 3-4 because that's what the Patriots used to stop it, right? And everyone's looking at the success of that, and everyone forgot this whole thing about Vince Wilfork being at nose. That's what was making it work as the answer to the spread. Is you can rush 3, but Vince Wilfork is good for 2 people because he takes up 3 gaps by just standing still, right? So the problem with the 3-4 as your answer to that and just rushing 3 is usually your nose is going to play offset of the center to maybe 1 gap or something like that, right? But eventually what you'll see is he gets double teamed. Your ends can't truly edge rush, even though they probably will. They're not supposed to truly edge rush to the point where they're going high upfield and they're really actually pinning their ears back and attacking that edge, because what happens? Well, your nose isn't going to go anywhere. He's just going to apply pressure straight forward. And if you do any kind of stunt with him, it's going to do even worse than what I'm about to say. He's going to stay still. Your ends go upfield to some degree. And then you're left with these two massive, huge holes that the quarterback can either step up to throw into a tighter window with a really, really low angle on the ball and high velocity, or you have these two gaps that sit between the ends and the nose guard that are just really easy for him to step up and run the ball, right? Or escape the pocket that way. And that's my problem with running 3-4s against like this is just you can't get away from having these giant two gaps unless your ends play really, really disciplined. And then at that point, it kind of eliminates your ability to rush upfield and actually attack the edge. So I prefer the teams that, hey, maybe we just leave that one spy if we have to, but we rely on an even front with a 4-man front, having the DNs. They do rush the edge, but they try to make sure they stay disciplined and not going too far upfield and creating that gap between now the defensive tackle and the defensive end. Because when you think about how defensive ends want to play, when you have that big athlete like a Lamar, or even like someone like a Dak who's, another dual threat, or, even to some extent a Tua or something like that, they want to pin their ears back every play and do anything they can to get to them. But if you're pinning your ears back and you're going 8 yards up the field and getting pushed out by the tackle and creating a massive throwing lane for these guys, especially when you're playing soft coverage, that's how a lot of these guys like a Lamar will take advantage of that and extend plays that way. When you're playing conservative, but your ends are not, because of the fact that they want to get after the quarterback so bad, that is where you can fall into this trap. So I think
it is.
I would expect Nico to do one of two things: either run an odd front where you do have just 3 men, but you're sending in you're sending in an extra blitzer in certain situations, and you do have that spy, or he kind of sticks with what he's been doing, where you let your dogs eat with sending 4, let your ends stay on the edges. But it'll be very, very key for Will Anderson and Grenard to stay disciplined and not go too far upfield and don't create. If it means that you have to play a little less aggressive in regards to your edge rushing technique, fine, but don't go charging 8 yards upfield and get pushed out and leave a massive throwing lane for Lamar to step up to and escape the pocket or extend the play between your defensive tackle and your defensive end. So I really think the discipline of the defensive end play, no matter what front you're in, is really, really key for this matchup, because in order to minimize Lamar's ability to extend plays, no matter what front you're running, even odd, what coverage you're running, soft or press man on the edges, that's going to be a key to look at, is how disciplined in edge rushing technique for the situation are your defensive ends playing. And that is what can really make the difference in keeping Lamar in there. Rely on the coverage sacks to come and not doing it all yourself, because when you're playing this kind of coverage, you're dropping 7, you're dropping 6, you're doing this zone spread. You can get a lot of sacks off of coverage. When you get past that 3 or 4 second mark and being in the pocket, that timer in his clock is ticking. He starts to move around. When he doesn't have anywhere to go, that's when your defensive tackles and defensive ends can bull rush and collapse that pocket, right? So they've got to have that trust in the secondary to allow them to get some coverage sacks. I think that's what you want to be looking for.
I'm going to add on to what you just said, Cole, because there's one trump card I think that you can really utilize to kind of help those defensive ends play aggressive. Because when you have a guy like Will Anderson, you want to let him go full blown to the ball, right? Utilize some of the linebackers on blitzes, right? Mix things up front so where you are allowing Will Anderson to have that freedom to play like that. If you utilize your blitz packages correctly, you should be able to contain some of those holes, and you should be able to create a pocket around Lamar Jackson and really force him to throw the football or take the sack.
Sure. The thing is, you can't pull a DJ Durkin and do that every single passing play, right?
No,
you gotta
absolutely
have some kind of a base
not.
front to work on, right? The whole idea is to have a really good zone scheme or something like that and be able to keep everything in front of you and make Lamar make more decisions, wear him down mentally, keep him in the pocket, collapse the pocket and stuff like that, and don't give him these huge gaps to step into. But at the same time, you want to do exactly what you're talking about, where you do throw in those wrinkles and you get those massive losses for sacks and stuff like that. But I'd say it's just as important to make sure you're actually containing him efficiently. You can still edge rush. It's just a matter of how do you create that edge as a defensive end?
No,
do you do it by actually creating the edge in regards to working the shoulder of the offensive tackle, doing some kind of a fake bull rush where you fake the bull and then you get the leverage on the outside shoulder to create that edge? or are you rushing an edge with just pure speed that may or may not be there if the offensive tackle beats you with his outset, right?
No,
if he
you
gets
said
that
it.
angle on you, a lot of defensive ends, even at the NFL level, will continue to rush that edge and push it upfield when it's not there. So when you don't have that, do you bull rush? Do you do it that way to try to collapse the pocket? Or do you engage, with leverage and then create the edge yourself via your actual technique and your hand placement? That's what you need to be looking for is, you're still being aggressive, but you got to recognize where you can continue to drive upfield versus I actually have to work technique and hand placement, maybe even drive upfield and wait for the inside move to come once you get even keel with the quarterback and you're almost baiting him to step up. And that's kind of where you get in that coverage sack area, right? So whether if it's collapsing in the pocket from, coverage sacks where he runs at a time, doesn't have any options to go, tries to escape and he falls right into a defensive tackle or defensive end, or it's from Will Anderson beating guys off the ball and getting that opportunity to edge rush with discipline and with velocity and speed, and aggressiveness. But you can do all of those things with discipline, right? And you can do all of those things with not discipline. You can be the best athlete in the field and you just run upfield the whole time for, go 10 yards behind the quarterback. And then he has that massive hole. And that's what they've got to avoid. That's what many quarterbacks that even in Texans playoff games, go back to the Chiefs, look at how many times Mahomes is able to escape when he blew that 21-point lead or whatever it was, not to give us any kind of flashbacks or PTSD from that, but go back and watch what was going on with our edge rushers there. And anytime Lamar's had really good success at extending plays, you're going to see that kind of lack of discipline with your edge rushers. Yeah. And overall, just your overall ability to perform as a unit defense comes with the discipline in your rushing from your front four and the discipline from your front four in general. So with the talent we have, especially in Will Anderson, Grenard, and the many defensive tackles that Dylan has listed out, discipline in the front four in particular is what's going to be key. The secondary is going to take away a lot of options from Lamar, hopefully, right? But, we don't want to create more by giving him better throwing lanes and letting him step up. So that's one of the keys that I think we're looking at. Now, Dylan, have you seen – I know we've had a lot of guys questionable for the last 4 or 5 weeks. Have you seen any guys we need to be worried about being ready, game time decisions, or are we looking a little more stable than we were, say, 2 weeks ago with the Colts?
Everyone is playing. The only person who's going to be out is Jerry Hughes.
Noah Brown too, I think, right? He's on IR?
Yeah, Noah Brown.
Yeah, Noah Brown's on IR, so that was pretty much expected if he won't play. But everyone who's not on IR, they're healthy. They're good to go. Andrew report was clean today. They gave Nico a day off, knowing that he's going to have a heavy workload. And Bernard and Anderson took the week off besides today. And everyone's good. We were fortunate to escape last week without an injury. And hopefully we win and can do the same this week. And
keep playing.
Keep going. Hopefully face KC and get that revenge and shock the world. They're living by that statement. There are some players who gave out some hats that said Houston versus everyone and had a Bible verse on the side and stuff. So
that's sick.
They're just hyped. They're ready. I think they're gonna try and shock the world. I mean, we know that. So
yeah, I mean, every win they've gotten since the Colts game has been a shock to the world, right? And really, this whole season's been a shock to the world. Going from was it 3 wins to now we're at, a 10-win season. And then now with the playoff win, it's just amazing. Amazing turnaround. I mean, I would have been happy with 6, dude. Last question, guys. One for each of you. Same question for both of you. I'll start with Dylan. Well, let's take CJ Stroud out of the equation because we know that he's going to be a key pivoting point for the direction of how this game could go. But who is a key player that you're kind of looking at that could be a pivotal point in the outcome of this game going into Baltimore?
This might be totally wrong, and I don't know how big of a role he is going to play, but something is telling me that Steven Sims Jr., who we just signed off the practice squad, he's going to do something. He's got that tank vibe to him. Like I said, he's got the speed. He's got the good playmaking abilities, and I think the Texans need that. They've been lacking that with no tank and with the injuries of Brown and stuff. I think Steven Sims, but I think at the end of the day, it's probably going to be Devin or Dalton. Stevenson is like my sleeper pick, but if we're being like brutally honest, it's going to be one of those key 3 receivers / running backs that you need because CJ can only do so much.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Bert, what's your kind of key player to watch?
I'm going to choose a couple players. And I'm
Dadgummit.
I know.
Instructions. I said one.
I'm sorry. I'll keep it simple. I'll focus on the Texans secondary. Lamar's a great player, man. Lamar's a really good player. But he's been shown that he kind of folds under pressure, right? If you can take away some of these receivers that Baltimore has, force Lamar to kind of crack a little more under the pressure. I don't think there's a player. I mean, let's be honest. ESPN is eating Lamar's case right now. They're saying you have to be, if you want to be the MVP, you have to win this game. It's a rookie head coach, a rookie quarterback. You should win this game. You haven't had a lot of success in the playoffs. If the Texans secondary can take away those receivers, you're going to put a even larger amount of pressure on Lamar, and that lets the defensive line, like Will Anderson, that lets Cashman, that lets why am I blanking on the other linebacker?
Cashman?
Not Cashman.
Perryman?
Oh, Perryman.
Perryman, yes. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. It lets them have a field day, right? Go get Lamar. That's your game. So defensively, player or key of the game is Texans secondary.
Yeah, for me, it's a similar thought. But for the reasons I've already mentioned, it's Will Anderson. Not just for making impact plays, but for staying smart and letting the game come to him. And don't force edge rush opportunities and give Lamar easy outs from the pocket. He's going to want to squeeze out of there whenever he can. So especially with Will Anderson's ability to rush the edge, you want to just want to make sure that he's going to be disciplined with that. And I absolutely think he will, because that's how he's played for most of the season. He hasn't been a guy to force the issue and go upfield when he doesn't need to. So we'll see how this all pans out, but I think it's another player to watch. Yeah, I mean, all it's left to do now, guys, is stress about it and watch the game, right? So,
right.
No. It's bet about it.
Oh dear.
Get in all your money before kickoff.
Oh jeez.
That's,
like I said, state guys, bad influence, guys.
Gamble responsibly. Gamble responsibly.
Oh goodness. All right, boys. Well, that's going to do it. It's been a pleasure as usual. We'll see what happens with this hopefully amazing playoff game we'll get to witness. And, obviously we're just privileged to be able to talk about playoff football at this time of the year and be mentioning talking about the Texans. So, we'll see what happens, and we'll recap it eventually with you guys again. And then, all it's left to say is go Texans, baby.
Go.
All right. Signing off.